You've achieved the leadership role that you worked for, but nobody warned you about the isolation that comes with it. This is the conversation about leadership loneliness that should have happened years ago, and the shift that moves you from isolation to real connection. Let me tell you what they don't put in leadership books. The higher you climb, the smaller your circle becomes. And most leaders are suffering in silence, convinced that admitting loneliness means admitting failure. But after working with executives across 4 continents for 25 years, I discovered loneliness isn't your leadership problem. It's your leadership information. And the moment you understand what it's actually telling you, everything shifts. I'm Dr. Kara, and I invite you to stay with me because by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what your loneliness is revealing about your leadership, and more importantly, what to do about it. Most leadership loneliness shows up in ways that you might not recognize. Maybe it's that moment when you share a win with your team, and instead of celebrating, you are already thinking about the next problem you have to solve alone. Or it's Sunday night, and the weight of Monday's decision sits heavy on your chest, but there's no one that you can call who would truly understand. Or maybe it's sitting in a room full of people who report to you and realizing you haven't had a real conversation, not a performance review, not a strategic discussion, but a genuine human connection in months. This is what I call the success paradox. You've worked your entire career to get here. You have the position, you have the authority, and you have the title. And now that you're here, you can't talk about the weight of it. Because who wants to hear the person at the top complain about being at the top? So you carry it alone. You smile through exhaustion. You project confidence that you don't always feel. And the loneliness deepens. I know this because I've lived it. Earlier in my career as an executive, I remember reaching the role I had worked years to achieve. And within months, I felt more isolated than I'd ever been. I tried to talk to people about it, colleagues, mentors, and even friends who I thought might understand. But every conversation felt like I was speaking a foreign language. You know that sound the teacher makes in the old Snoopy cartoons, that muffled wah, 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 wah. Well, that's what it felt like when I tried to explain what I was carrying. Not because people didn't care, but because unless you've sat in that seat, unless you felt the weight of decisions that affect people's livelihood, their families, their futures, it's almost impossible to understand. So I stopped trying to explain it. Convinced myself this is just what leadership looked like at this level. That isolation was the price of authority. What I didn't realize then, and what took me years to understand, was that loneliness wasn't coming from the role itself. It was coming from the pressure I was putting on myself. The self-imposed belief that I had to have all the answers, that I couldn't show uncertainty, and that asking for support meant I wasn't capable of the position that I had earned. And underneath it all, the conditioned pressure. The messages I'd absorbed my entire career about what strong leadership was supposed to be like. Never falter, never admit, never struggle, never let them see you sweat. Those beliefs were suffocating me, and they were creating the very isolation I was desperately trying to avoid. So here's your first shift, and this one matters. That loneliness you're feeling, it's not because you're doing leadership wrong. It's because somewhere along the way, you started believing that leadership means having all the answers, carrying all the weight, and never showing the cracks. You internalize the idea that vulnerability equals weakness, that asking for support means you're not capable, that connection is something that you do for your team, not something that you need for yourself. That belief system is what's creating isolation. Not your inability to lead, not your lack of skills, not even the demands of your role. It's a story that you've been telling yourself about what strong leadership looks like. Because when you lead from isolation, 3 things happen and they compound over time. First, you accumulate what I call relationship debt. Those are all the authentic conversations that you've avoided, the vulnerability that you've bypassed, the moments where you could have said, I don't know, or I'm struggling with this too, but instead you performed certainty. Every avoided conversation adds to the debt, and over time you look around and you realize you're surrounded by people, your team, your colleagues, maybe even your family, but you're genuinely connected to almost no one. Second, you fall into the control trap. You start believing that you're responsible for outcomes that you don't fully control. Your team's performance, the company's results, other people's perceptions of you. So you tighten your grip. You micromanage because you think that's how you ensure success. You carry everything yourself because delegation feels like risk. But the more you try to control, the more distance you create between yourself and the people that you're trying to lead. And that distance, it feeds the loneliness. Third, and this one breaks my heart when I see it, you lose touch with yourself. You stop checking in with your own values, your own boundaries, your own truth. You become so focused on being the leader that everyone else needs you to be, you forget who you actually are beneath the role. And when you disconnect from yourself, genuine connection with anyone else becomes impossible. So here's the second shift I want you to receive. Your loneliness isn't a character flaw, it's data. It's information about where you've disconnected, first from yourself and then from others. And the beautiful thing about data, once you understand what it's telling you, you can actually do something about it. This is what I call moving from control-based leadership to connection-based leadership. Control-based leadership asks, how do I manage outcomes? How do I ensure results? How do I maintain authority? Connection-based leadership asks, how am I showing up? What am I actually in control of? This is where my receive, perceive, respond framework becomes transformational. Receive means acknowledging what's actually happening, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the weight of it all, without judgment or shame. Perceive means understanding what that information reveals. Your loneliness isn't telling you that you're failing. It's telling you that you've been trying to lead from performance instead of presence. Respond means making a different choice, not controlling how people see you, but focusing on how you're actually being with yourself first and then your team. When I finally understood this, when I stopped trying to control how I appeared and started focusing on how I was actually showing up, a lot of things shifted for me. I remember the first time I sat with my team and said, I don't have the answer to this yet, but I'm working through it. The relief on their faces was immediate, not because I'd admitted weakness, but because I'd finally given them permission to be human too. One of my senior leaders later told me, I've been waiting for you to say something like that for months. It made me realize that I don't have to pretend either. That moment taught me something very critical. The isolation that I had been experiencing, it wasn't protecting my authority. It was eroding my influence. Because real leadership doesn't come from appearing invulnerable. It comes from being trustworthy, and trust requires truth. This is where grace becomes everything. Grace isn't just forgiveness. It's how you treat yourself and others after acknowledging disappointment or recognizing that you've been operating from the wrong paradigm. So many leaders I work with realize that they've been leading from isolation and their first instinct is self-criticism. How did I let it get this bad? Why didn't I see this sooner? But grace says you did the best you could with the understanding that you had, and now you have a new understanding. So what happens next? Grace gives you permission to sit with the discomfort of recognition without drowning in shame about it. And from that place of grace towards yourself first, you can begin to extend genuine connection to others. Not connection that's strategic or performative, but connection that is real. Connection that says, I don't have all the answers, but I'm fully here and I'm learning alongside you. And that's the kind of leadership that doesn't create loneliness, it dissolves it. So let me give you something that you can do this week. I want you to ask yourself this question and really sit with it. What would change if I stopped trying to control how people perceive me and started focusing on how I actually am showing up? Not how you're performing, not what mask you're wearing, not what version of strength that you think you need to project, but who you actually are when you're present with yourself. The research shows, and what I've witnessed across 25 years of working with leaders, is that the executives who report the highest level of fulfillment aren't the ones who've mastered appearing invulnerable. They're the ones who have learned to be genuinely present with themselves first and then their teams. They're the ones who understand that comfort, emotional comfort, mental comfort, relational comfort creates conditions for real leadership presence. And presence is what transforms isolation into connection. Not because you fixed everything, not because you've become perfect, but because you've become real. Now, I know some of you are watching this and thinking, this resonates deeply, but I don't even know where to start. Maybe you've been isolated for so long that the idea of reaching out feels vulnerable in ways that you're not ready for. Or maybe you're thinking, I don't have anyone in my life who would understand this. No one who gets the unique weight of leadership at this level. And if that's you, I want you to know you're not alone in this feeling. That's exactly why I created my virtual mind. It's designed specifically for leaders who need support in real time. Leaders who need a space where they can be heard, where they can be honest about what they're carrying, and where they can get the guidance that they need without judgment, without performance, and without pretense. It's available 24/7 because I know leadership challenges don't wait for business hours. So if you're feeling isolated in your leadership right now, if you recognize yourself in what I've shared today, I want you to reach out. The link to my virtual mind is in the description below. This is not about downloading another productivity tool or adding another task to your list. This is about finally having a space where you can be real, where you can say what you actually think without having to worry about how it sounds, where you can process the weight that you're carrying with someone who understands the psychology of leadership, not just the strategy of it. Because you don't have to carry this alone anymore. That is what this was designed for, to give you a sense of belonging, a sense of being heard and felt, and to make sure that you get the support that you need in real time. Before you go, I want to leave you with this. The loneliness that you're experiencing isn't a sign that you're not cut out for leadership. It's a sign that you've been leading from a paradigm that was never designed to be sustainable. Control creates distance. Connection creates possibility. And the shift from one to the other, it starts with you being willing to acknowledge what's real, not just for your team, but for yourself first. This is the work, naming the unnamed, embodying grace, pivoting from control to connection, and understanding that your worth as a leader isn't measured by how well you hide the struggle. It's measured by how present you can be in the middle of it. I'm Dr. Kara, and remember, the leaders who transform aren't the ones who never felt alone. They're the ones who decided that loneliness didn't get the final word.